2:17 local time. The night above the Persian Gulf is calm. On the forward deck of a U.S. Navy destroyer assigned to the Fifth Fleet, a lookout studies the darkness ahead. The engines hold a steady rhythm at cruising speed. Far off on the horizon, the shoreline of Bahrain glows like a thin strip of light. Inside the Combat Information Center, the radar picture is quiet, until it changes. A surface search operator leans closer to the screen. New contacts, bearing 035, multiple. The spy radar begins picking up thin, fast-moving returns rising from the northern coastline. At first, they seem like interference, a flicker, a glitch. Then the tracks settle into clear patterns. Speed increasing, altitude low, inbound. The tactical display shifts from green to amber. 2:17, possible cruise profiles. The air warfare coordinator speaks in a calm, almost flat voice. Count 12, stand by for classification. No one raises their voice, they do not need to. Condition 3, across the ship, key stations come alive. Boots strike steel, hatches are sealed. The forward 5-inch gun turns a few degrees to starboard, smooth and deliberate. Close-in defense systems power up with a rising mechanical whine. Below deck, vertical launch cells unlock one after another. On the main screen, the contacts keep multiplying. 14, 17, 20, some skim close to the sea, others climb, then begin shallow downward arcs. This is not random movement, it is coordinated. 2:18, the destroyer's Aegis combat system begins automatic evaluation. Each track receives a number, a speed, a bearing, a projected arrival point, and a time to closest approach. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The ship is operating lawfully in international waters, part of the security shield around the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain. Tonight, that shield is being tested. Recommend defensive engagement, the systems officer says. Engage, the captain replies. No hesitation. The first pair of Standard Missile 2 interceptors surges from the forward launch cells, rising into the night on twin columns of flame. The deck trembles. Sailors standing watch topside feel the heat pass over them as the interceptors climb, their engines burning bright against the black sky. Inside CIC, the intercept geometry tightens. Standard Missile 2, time to intercept 30 seconds. The incoming tracks begin to split. Several drop lower, staying close to the curve of the sea, a classic sea skimming profile designed to reduce reaction time and force the ship to respond faster. 2:19, splash 1. A bright burst lights up high above the Gulf. Fragments fall harmlessly into open water. Splash 2. But the radar picture does not clear. More tracks are coming. Electronic warfare operators bring the SLQ-32 suite online. The destroyer begins sending controlled waves of jamming energy, searching for guidance signals and trying to weaken targeting locks. New launch indications, a sensor technician calls out. Additional heat signatures inland. Wave 2. The number on the screen rises past 25. This is no longer a warning. It is a saturation attempt. Somewhere along the northern coastline, shore-based launch units are still active. 2:20. Another pair of Standard Missile 2 interceptors launches, then another. The aft launcher joins the defensive sequence. Interceptors rise in staggered rhythm, one after another, cutting bright paths through the darkness. Above the Gulf, the sky flickers with distant intercepts, pale flashes against the horizon. Track Sierra 21 breaking through the outer ring. The air warfare coordinator warns. Sea skimmer, Mach 0.8, bearing 040. Time to arrival, 1 minute and 50 seconds. The engagement is moving closer. Shift to ESSM comes the order. Evolved Sea Sparrow interceptors rise in tight pairs, built for fast threats moving low over the surface. Their motors flare, then the interceptors level out, racing just above the waterline. The destroyer heels slightly as it adjusts course, narrowing its profile and tightening the defensive geometry. 2:21. Ballistic profile detected. Another voice cuts in. High arc, fast descent. A medium-range ballistic object, likely released minutes earlier, is now dropping into its final phase. Recommend Standard Missile 6, authorized. A single Standard Missile 6 climbs sharply into the night, guided by shipboard radar and external sensor data. For a brief moment, the tactical screen becomes a web of crossing vectors, each line closing toward the same point. Then the confirmation appears. Intercept confirmed, high altitude. A low, distant shock rolls across the water. But the situation is not finished. 4 inbound cruise profile tracks remain inside the outer defensive ring. Distance closing, 35,000 yards. The Phalanx close-in defense mounts begin tracking automatically, their white domes turning with cold precision. Their radar feeds merge with the ship's combat display, locking onto the remaining inbound paths. 2:22, multiple leakers. Prepare close-in defense, no panic, no shouting, only systems moving through practiced sequences, procedures written long before this night ever began. Above the horizon, another bright burst marks an ESSM intercept. 3 tracks left. One small unmanned signature breaks slightly off axis, turning toward the larger radar silhouette deeper in the formation, where the 5th Fleet flagship is operating in support. The Air Warfare Coordinator leans forward. Confirmed coordinated pattern. This is deliberate. Outside, the Gulf remains black and flat. Inside the Combat Information Center, radar light reflects across focused faces. Seconds fall away. Layer by layer, steel, sensors, and software stand between the fleet and the final approach. And somewhere beyond the horizon, more launch signatures begin to appear. 2:22 local time. The first wave is still not over. On the tactical display, 4 cruise profile tracks remain inside the outer defensive ring. They are low, fast, and following the curve of the sea at less than 50 feet above the surface. Sea skimming. A path designed to hide in surface clutter until the final moments. Range 28,000 yards, the Air Warfare Coordinator calls out. Speed steady. Bearing 040. The destroyer's SPY radar adjusts its gain, filtering out surface noise. Fire control radars narrow their focus, marking each inbound track with precise beams. Engage with ESSM. 2 more evolved Sea Sparrow interceptors rise from the forward launcher, their exhaust briefly lighting the bow. Almost immediately, they level out, cutting across the waterline at extreme speed. Inside CIC, no one looks away. Time to intercept. 12 seconds. The first ESSM meets its target in a sharp, low flash, barely visible over the horizon. The second follows moments later, scattering fragments across the surface and leaving a widening ripple behind. 2 tracks disappear. 2 remain. 2:23. Ballistic re-entry confirmed. Second profile descending. The radar picture shifts upward. A high-altitude track, steeper than the low cruise profiles, drops quickly into its terminal phase. Standard Missile 6 ready. Authorized. The Standard Missile 6 rises from the aft vertical launch system, climbing aggressively into the dark. Its guidance updates in mid-course, fed by a shared radar picture from several ships across the formation. This is not one ship acting alone. This is a network. The Standard Missile 6 climbs into the dark, a thin white line rising through the night. For several seconds, both symbols on the tactical display close toward the same point. Then they meet. Intercept confirmed. A distant flash opens high above the Gulf. The descending track disappears from the screen, but the pressure does not stop. 3 new low-altitude contacts appear along the northern edge of the display. Additional sea skimming profiles. Wave 2 confirmed. Total inbound now 27. On the bridge, the captain stands motionless, hands clasped behind his back. He does not watch the flashes in the distance. He watches the horizon. Maintain course, he says quietly. Below, the electronic warfare team increases output. The SLQ-32 suite sends controlled bursts across known guidance bands. The electromagnetic space fills with carefully shaped noise. Not random, precise. Active radar seekers detected, the electronic warfare officer reports. Multiple emissions, profile matches. That confirms it. These inbound systems are not drifting blindly. They are actively searching. 224, range 18,000 yards. Recommend close-in defense preparation. The Phalanx close-in systems finish their warm-up cycle. Their internal radars settle onto the nearest inbound track. The white domes rotate smoothly, almost calmly, following the threat line with mechanical precision. Mount 1 tracking, Mount 2 tracking. Outside, the first cruise profile object breaks the horizon line, a faint silhouette against the black surface of the sea. Close-in defense authorized. The forward Phalanx comes alive with a harsh metallic roar. Streams of tracer fire reach into the darkness, forming a dense moving barrier. The inbound object breaks apart in midair, flashing brightly less than a mile from the hull. Fragments fall into the water. The ship holds steady. Splash 1. Another cruise profile track drops even lower, trying to slip through the defensive angle. Shift Mount 2. The aft Phalanx opens up, firing at a relentless pace, nearly 75 rounds each second. The inbound object shatters, debris skipping across the surface before vanishing into the sea. Splash 2. But the display is still not clear. A smaller radar return turns unexpectedly. It is slower than the cruise profiles, but it is maneuvering. Unmanned aerial contact adjusting vector. Possible targeting platform. Instead of continuing straight, it begins a slight orbit, likely feeding final guidance updates to the remaining inbound tracks. Electronic deception engaged, the warfare officer announces. The destroyer begins placing false position data into the signal environment, trying to pull the small platform sensors away from the formation. For a moment, the unmanned system steadies. Then it wavers. Its track drifts several degrees away from the ships. Contact losing lock. A final burst from the forward Phalanx ends the track. The small signature dissolves into static. 225. The tactical display steadies. No active inbound tracks inside 10,000 yards. Outer radar still scanning north. Silence returns to the Combat Information Center. But it is not relief, it is calculation. Launch origin triangulated, an intelligence specialist says. Multiple coastal sites. Approximate grid confirms coordinated inland positions. This was deliberate. Not a rogue unit, not an accident. A synchronized barrage aimed at the Fifth Fleet. The captain receives an updated status report from the formation. Other destroyers confirm successful intercepts. No direct impacts, no serious damage, only minor vibration from nearby shockwaves. The fleet is still intact. Above them, the first patrol aircraft from the carrier group check in over secure channels. Viper flight on station, establishing barrier. They push north, forming a protective arc beyond the ship's radar horizon. 227. The sea is dark again. No flames, no visible smoke, only fragments cooling in open water. But farther inland, infrared satellites detect lingering heat signatures from launch positions that have not yet moved. The Air Warfare Coordinator looks toward the captain. Sir, coastal signatures remain active. The meaning is clear. The defensive phase is beginning to shift. The next step will not be another intercept. It will be a decision. And somewhere along that coastline, radar operators are watching the same sky, aware that their first wave did not succeed, but unaware of what may already be moving in response. 2:28 local time. The sea is quiet again. Too quiet. Inside the operations center, no one relaxes. The radar picture is clear for the first time in 11 minutes, but the infrared overlays tell another story. Faint heat signatures continue to flicker along the northern coastline. Launch positions that have not gone cold. Recommend sustained close-in posture, the Air Warfare Coordinator says. The captain gives a single nod. Maintain defensive configuration. No step down. The destroyer remains at general quarters. Phalanx mounts stay ready. Missile cells remain active. Electronic warfare teams continue low-level sweep patterns, searching for any renewed emissions. Above the formation, two F/A-18E Super Hornets settle into a tight patrol orbit. Their radars scan outward, extending the defensive perimeter dozens of miles beyond the ships. Viper 1, picture clean immediate, comes the call from airborne early warning. Then a pause. Stand by. New air defense radar activation inland. On the destroyer's electronic warfare console, a narrowband spike appears. Brief fire control quality search. They are rebuilding the picture, the electronic warfare officer reports. Intermittent tracking attempts. This is the dangerous moment. After the first exchange. Before the second. 2:29. A fresh contact appears on the radar. Single track, low altitude, speed increasing. Possible late launch, CIC calls out. Bearing 032. No large wave this time, just one smaller radar signature, range 35,000 yards. The captain does not hesitate. Engage early. An evolved Sea Sparrow interceptor launches, cutting low across the water. The seconds stretch. The inbound track dips even lower, trying to hide inside surface clutter. Track maneuvering. The interceptor corrects mid-course, guided by updated data from the ship. Intercept confirmed. A sharp flash appears on the horizon. The single track disappears, but the radar sweep widens again. Two fast-moving aerial contacts lift off inland, climbing quickly. Possible aircraft, the Air Warfare Coordinator says. Speed 450 knots, heading south. They level at medium altitude, staying just outside the declared missile envelope. Viper flight, contacts north. Angels 20, airborne control calls. Viper 1, Tally 2 comes the response. The American aircraft angles slightly higher, showing radar presence without crossing the next threshold. No missiles launch, no locks are declared, only presence. 2:31. Below deck, the destroyer's crew completes rapid damage checks. Minor shockwave vibration reported in forward compartments. No structural compromise. Systems green. On deck, sailors remain secured at key stations. A faint trace of burned propellant still hangs in the night air. Drone-sized return. Northeast quadrant, a radar operator says suddenly. A small contact appears on the screen, moving unevenly. Possible reconnaissance platform. Engage non-kinetic measures first, the captain orders. Electronic warfare output increases. Controlled interference pushes outward in measured pulses. On the screen, the small contact begins to jitter, struggling against the disruption. Contact unstable. The unmanned system dips, recovers, then turns sharply west. Recommend physical intercept. Approved. The forward phalanx fires a short, disciplined burst. The contact disappears into a scatter of fragments. 2:33. The sky remains contested, but restrained. Aircraft inland hold their distance. No fire control radar locks illuminate the formation. No new inbound profiles appear. On the tactical display, the 5th Fleet formation settles into a layered defensive arc. Destroyers forward, cruiser offset, flagship protected deeper inside. Every ship shares sensor data through encrypted networks. What one sees, all see. This is not improvisation. This is doctrine. 2:35. Launch site activity decreasing. Intelligence reports. Multiple coastal radars offline. The earlier intercepts and the immediate patrol presence have disrupted the timing. The window for another coordinated attempt is narrowing, but inland infrared satellites capture something else. Mobile launch vehicles are changing positions. They are not leaving. They are relocating. The captain studies the updated grid. Confirm launch origin triangulation. Confirmed. Multiple batteries within a 20-mile coastal belt. He does not raise his voice. He does not need to. Prepare response options inside CIC. The tone changes. Not louder, not faster, just different. Defensive calculations begin giving way to response geometry. Long-range naval mission planners start loading pre-surveyed coastal coordinates. Carrier air-wing controllers adjust fuel and readiness status for aircraft already airborne and capable of response operations. Above the fleet, the F/A-18 Super Hornets widen their patrol orbit slightly, marking invisible boundaries in the sky. The aircraft to the north begin turning away, increasing separation. They have seen the intercepts. They have seen the barrier form. 2:37. No new inbound tracks, no renewed radar locks. The Gulf returns to black stillness, but the fleet remains at full readiness. Because in modern naval warfare, survival is not the final state. Control is. The last fragments from the intercepted systems sink beneath the calm water. The radar picture now shows only friendly tracks and distant coastal returns. The air warfare coordinator turns slightly toward the captain. Sir, defensive phase complete. Fleet secure. A brief silence follows. The captain nods once. Very well. He looks north toward the coastline that had lit up only minutes earlier. They launched, he says quietly. In the dim glow of the CIC screens, response planning icons begin to appear across the map. And somewhere inland, radar operators watch their scopes clear, unaware that the next phase has already been calculated. Not in anger, not in panic, in precision. 2:41 local time. The defensive phase is over. No alarms sound now. No missiles rise from the deck. But inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere has changed. Response planning overlays replace intercept vectors on the main display. Coastal grids appear in quiet blue squares, radar arrays, suspected mobile launchers, command nodes previously cataloged through months of surveillance. Confirm launch origin correlation, the captain says. Correlation confirmed, intelligence replies. 3 primary coastal batteries, 1 fixed radar array, 1 mobile command vehicle, all within 20 nautical miles of the shoreline. The decision does not require debate. Execute response package. There is no dramatic pause, no raised voice, only the transfer of authorization codes across secure channels. 2:43. On the destroyer's forward deck, vertical launch hatches open in sequence. Deep inside the hull, long-range cruise missiles receive their final mission updates, navigation points, terrain-matching data, low-altitude flight paths designed to cross the Gulf before turning inland. Missiles ready, launch authorized. One after another, they rise from the deck with a deep, controlled roar. They climb briefly, then level out, their engines burning steadily as they disappear north into the darkness. At the same moment, 20 miles to the west, another destroyer in the formation opens its own launch cells. More missiles rise. This is not a single-ship response. This is coordinated suppression. 2:45. Above the fleet, the E-2D Hawkeye tightens its orbit, feeding continuous radar updates to surface ships and airborne aircraft. The carrier air wing, already airborne in a defensive posture, shifts mission profiles. Strike Alpha cleared inbound. Airborne control transmits. 4 F/A-18E Super Hornets adjust heading north, descending slightly to remain below hostile radar coverage. Under their wings, precision-guided munitions remain steady. GBU-38 JDAM weapons are programmed for hardened targets. The EA-18G Growlers trail slightly behind, electronic warfare pods active as they prepare to disrupt coastal sensors. 2:47. The first cruise missile reaches waypoint 2, then banks sharply inland. On the destroyer's screens, real-time satellite confirmation begins feeding in. Heat signatures brighten along the coastline as coastal radar systems attempt to reacquire the approaching tracks. Coastal Fire Control radar active, electronic warfare reports. Seconds later, the radar signature disappears. Impact confirmed. A bright flash opens over the fixed array position. The screen confirms the structure has collapsed. Radar site neutralized. Another cruise missile passes low over the water, then turns toward a suspected mobile launch cluster. Infrared imagery shows vehicles attempting to move. Too late. Impact. Secondary blasts ripple outward as fuel and stored equipment ignite in rapid succession. 0249. The airborne response group reaches its release point. Growler jamming active, comes the call. Electronic interference floods known air defense frequencies. Coastal surface-to-air systems struggle to form a clean track. Alpha 1, pickle. The first JDAM releases cleanly, gliding downward under satellite guidance. It strikes a reinforced bunker housing command and control equipment. The blast is contained but decisive. The roof folds inward. Alpha 2, pickle. A second munition lands near a cluster of mobile launch vehicles attempting to disperse. A thermal bloom expands rapidly. Within seconds, the 3 primary launch locations are either disabled or burning. 252. The aircraft that had been holding at a distance turn north at full speed. They do not challenge the response group. On the destroyer, the screens remain steady. The captain watches the feed without changing expression. Assess remaining launch capability. Thermal signatures decreasing across all 3 coastal grids. Intelligence reports. No additional launch plumes detected. Cruise missile flight paths complete. The strike aircraft turns south, moving back under the protective umbrella of the fleet. 255. The Gulf remains dark. No renewed launches, no high-arc tracks, no engine trails cutting through the night. The 5th Fleet Formation maintains its position in international waters. Steady course, steady speed. The message has been delivered. Not through speeches, through timing, coordination, and reach. Inside the Combat Information Center, the logs update automatically. Every intercept, every launch, every coordinate. There is no celebration, only confirmation. Primary response objectives achieved, operations reports. Launch infrastructure degraded. The captain gives a small nod. Maintain elevated readiness because in this region, silence can mean reset or recalculation. 302. Infrared satellites show residual fires along the coastline. Emergency vehicles gather near the affected sites. Radar activity remains minimal. The fleet does not pursue, it does not advance. It holds. Layered defense remains active. Combat air patrol remains airborne. Electronic surveillance continues scanning for new emissions. The counterstrike was precise, limited, and contained, but unmistakable. They attempted to overwhelm. The fleet responded by reducing their ability to try again. No warning shots, no movement beyond the threat envelope. Only steel, coordination, and reach. And somewhere inland, commanders reviewing their own screens now see empty radar scopes and burning coordinates where launch positions once operated. The Gulf is calm again, but the balance has shifted. Not through noise, through control, 3:18 local time. The Gulf is still. No launch plumes, no radar spikes, no rising engine trails cutting across the night. Only the faint glow of controlled fires along the distant coastline. Small, contained, no longer sending active launch signatures. Inside the Combat Information Center, the tactical display has returned to baseline. Friendly tracks only. Combat Air Patrol holding north. Electronic surveillance running at sustained intensity. Fleet status, the captain asks. Green across the formation, comes the reply. No battle damage, all systems operational. 27 inbound threats, 0 impacts. 3 launch complexes degraded, no personnel losses. The numbers are simple, the implications are not. Above the formation, F/A 18 aircraft rotate through fuel cycles, maintaining a visible perimeter. The E-2D Hawkeye continues its orbit, radar sweeping hundreds of miles in every direction. On deck, ordnance crews quietly reset defensive cells. Launch tubes used earlier are already being prepared for replenishment. This is not a victory lap. It is reset. 342. Satellite confirmation arrives with high-resolution imagery of the response zones. 1 fixed radar array reduced to debris, 2 mobile launcher positions burning out. A command bunker collapsed inward. Communications traffic across the sector has dropped sharply. Residual emissions remain minimal. Intelligence confirms coastal radar coverage has been degraded. The 5th Fleet flagship remains steady in international waters off Bahrain. No deviation in course, no retreat. Maritime traffic, temporarily rerouted during the engagement window, begins to return to normal. Tankers resume scheduled transits. Civilian shipping lanes reopen under naval escort. There is no public broadcast from the bridge. No dramatic declaration, only continuity. 410. Air assets inland remain grounded beyond their forward operating bases. Surface vessels stay in port. Electronic monitoring shows cautious, limited communication among coastal units. The attempted saturation strike did not fracture the fleet. It clarified the threshold. In modern naval conflict, escalation is measured in seconds and meters. Tonight, those measurements favored training, coordination, and layered defense. Inside the Combat Information Center, sailors rotate out of peak adrenaline posture and into sustained watch. Helmets come off. Headsets remain on. Log entries continue. Each intercept is archived. Each radar emission is stored. Each second is time-stamped. Because documentation is not optional, it is strategic. 0555. First light begins to soften the eastern horizon. The Gulf shifts from black to dark blue. Debris fields from intercepted cruise profile systems drift quietly across the water, already being mapped for recovery and analysis. The sea itself gives no sign that less than 3 hours earlier it had been lit by high arcs, defensive launches, and flashes over the horizon. The captain steps briefly onto the bridge wing, scanning the waterline. No smoke trails now. No unknown aircraft overhead. Only friendly patrols, calm water, and an intact formation. They launch to intimidate, the operations officer says quietly beside him. The captain does not answer right away. He watches the sun break across the horizon. They miscalculated, he replies. Back inside CIC, a final status summary scrolls across the main display. 27 inbound threats stopped. 2 high arc intercepts confirmed. Multiple cruise profile systems defeated across the outer and inner defensive rings. Unmanned reconnaissance platform removed from the picture. 3 coastal launch complexes degraded. Fleet operational readiness uncompromised. The Fifth Fleet does not alter its patrol pattern. It does not withdraw. It does not move beyond its legal envelope. It remains. Because presence, sustained and disciplined, is often more decisive than spectacle. By 6 o'clock in the morning, local time, the Gulf has returned to its commercial rhythm. Fishing boats move cautiously along the shallows. Cargo vessels follow predictable lanes. Naval escorts maintain quiet overwatch. There will be statements later. There will be analysis. But at sea, the calculation is simpler. They launched. The fleet absorbed the pressure. Then it answered with precision. No panic, no uncontrolled escalation, no overreach. Layered defense held. Response authority was exercised within defined limits. The message was delivered without a single spoken sentence. Steel does not argue. It calculates. And in the early light over Bahrain, the Fifth Fleet sails on exactly as it had before. 2:17. Steady course, steady speed. Ready. Because in contested waters, deterrence is not loud. It is consistent. And tonight, consistency held the line.